interesting there. Now, by the end of next week, all London primary schools will close their applications for pupils for next year. Research shows the scramble for places here in the capital is increasingly tough, with 2/3 of schools oversubscribed. Well, Ed Rushton is founder of Find a School, the website which conducted the study. Now, it does seem as if this problem in London in particular is getting increasingly more tricky. Why do you think that is?
It's very simple, really. It's that there's an increasing school-age population. There are more kids, so it's not a particularly complicated one to understand. There are more children, and there's been a huge growth in the population, and there hasn't been the same growth in the number of primary school places.
And I suppose the number of schools being built as well hasn't managed to keep up.
So that lots of schools are being built, but it doesn't quite keep pace. So most of the time, actually, the local authorities are trying to add in capacity to the existing schools, squeezing in extra classrooms where they can. But you can only take that so far, and I think we've kind of exhausted probably almost all of that possibility over the last few years, and still the population's growing. So now we're in the position where we need new schools.
So what are you hearing that parents are doing in terms of extreme measures to try and make their case more favourable in terms of getting into schools?
Well, to be honest, there isn't an awful lot that you can really do. So for the parents who are going to be applying this for next week, or that need to get their applications in by the end of next week, there isn't an awful lot you can do. The most common thing that people will look to do is to try and meet criteria for, say, for example, faith schools, is attending church, even when they don't particularly, it's the only reason really they're going to church. They'll go to church for several years just in order to secure a place at school. Otherwise, people moving house to try to get into the right, or where they think is the right area to live. So those are the main kinds of things that we see people doing.
And area is a key issue as well, because catchment areas do seem to be getting smaller, aren't they? Which is quite unrealistic in London.
It's very difficult to get into some of the most popular schools. So you get tiny catchment areas down to, in some cases, just 100 metres. And there are several. There are lots of schools where catchment areas are less than 500 metres in London. And they change. These are the catchment areas. They change from year to year, so it just depends on the demographics of that particular year group. And so again, for thinking about the people who are applying next week, or getting their applications in next week, then it's important for them to do their research and find out as much as they can about what happened in previous years about the different schools, and not to pin their hopes on a single school. And the reason why I set up the Find a School website was to try and provide some of this information to help people going through this process and doing their research on schools.
And if you are a parent that finds yourself in the position where you don't get any of the schools that you were hoping to get your child into, what would your advice be?
Well, it's not to panic. The process doesn't end when the initial offers come out. The process actually continues running. Not everyone will take up their place, so there'll be a waiting list that you will end up getting put on automatically if you didn't get your preferences at school, the schools that you put on your application form. Get in touch with the local authority, speak to them about what the different options might be. Hopefully they'll be able to find you a place at a good school nearby. And then if all else fails, then there are options to appeal the decision in case something has gone wrong in the process.
Well, Ed Rushton, good advice there. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks very much.
You're watching London Live News.